Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever had a moment when you looked at your life and thought, this can't be it, there has to be more? I was there, stuck, drained, existing, not really living, until one day a simple shift happened. Not a new job, not a miracle, just a new mindset. And that mindset, that one internal decision, changed everything for me. You see, we spend so much time trying to fix what's outside of us, our circumstances, our relationships, our careers, but rarely do we stop to ask, well, what if the real change starts inside? Today, I want to share with you the mindset that didn't just improve my life. It transformed it immediately, because when we learn to think differently, we begin to live differently. Let me take you back to that moment. Imagine waking up every day, going through the motions, doing what you're supposed to do, but still feeling like something is missing. That was me. I had goals, I had a job, I was checking the boxes, but something felt off. Like I was chasing things that didn't really matter to me. That's when I stumbled upon a game, changing truthing. Most start with A, what they do, but never stop to ask A, why they do it. And that shift, starting with why, became the mindset that transformed everything. When you start with A, what you focus on external things, what job you have, what car you drive, what others think of you. It's surface level. It's about achieving things that look good on paper. But when you start with why, you go deeper. You ask yourself, what's the purpose behind what I'm doing? What fuels me? What impact do I want to create? And suddenly, the things you do and the way you live start to feel meaningful. For me, this meant stepping back and asking a hard question, why am I really doing any of this? At first, I didn't have a clear answer. I realized I had been driven by approval, comparison, and fear of failure, not purpose. I wasn't choosing my path with intention. I was reacting to life instead of leading it. That moment of honesty was uncomfortable, but it was also freeing. It gave me the clarity to realign my actions with something deeper than just results. When I began with a why, I noticed something else. See, I stopped chasing quick wins and started building something lasting. I stopped measuring my worth by how busy or successful I looked and started focusing on whether my work was aligned with what I believe. It wasn't about abandoning ambition. It was about fueling it with purpose. That mindset created a level of internal motivation and resilience I had never experienced before. Because when you're clear on why you're doing something, you don't burn out as easily. You don't get knocked down by rejection or failure as much. You keep going because the mission is bigger than the moment. This shift also impacted my relationships. I became more intentional with how I showed up for people. Instead of performing or trying to impress, I started connecting. I listened more. I spoke with honesty, not just strategy. Because when you live from your why, authenticity becomes your default. And people feel that. They trust that. Relationships deepen and your presence becomes more powerful. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Professionally, starting with LY changed my decisions. I started saying no to things that looked good but didn't feel right. I took risks that made no sense on the surface but were deeply aligned with my purpose. And every time I honored my why, doors opened. Maybe not always immediately, but always meaningfully. I became less reactive to trends, less concerned with comparison, and more grounded in my own journey. This is the mindset that changed my life immediately, the shift from chasing F or what to living why. It didn't require a new degree, a big break, or someone's permission. It required courage to pause, to reflect, and to choose differently. And once you do, the clarity you gain creates a ripple effect. Your energy changes, your direction sharpens, your confidence grows, not because you have all the answers, but because you finally know your reason. So if you're feeling stuck, unmotivated, or uncertain, don't rush to fix the symptoms. Start by asking the deeper question, why am I doing this? Because when you find your why, the woo-how men will start to take care of themselves. There was a time in my life when I looked at everything through the lens of what I didn't have. I didn't have enough money. I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough support, confidence, or talent. And because I believed that, acted like it, I played small. I hesitated. I waited for the perfect moment that never came. That's the trap of a scarcity mindset, the belief that there's never enough. But the moment I shifted to an abundance mindset, everything in my life began to change immediately. A scarcity mindset is sneaky. It sounds like being realistic. It sounds like planning carefully. But really, it's fear wearing a clever disguise. It tells you there's not enough opportunity, so you shouldn't take a risk. It tells you there's not enough recognition, so you compete instead of collaborate. It tells you that other people's success somehow takes away from your own potential. It builds walls instead of bridges. I lived in that space for far too long, until I realized it was a choice. And if I could choose scarcity, I could also choose abundance. An abundance mindset starts with a different belief: there is enough. There's enough room for your voice. There's enough time to grow. There's enough love, support, creativity, and opportunity, not because life is perfect, but because you're willing to see the possibilities instead of the limitations. That doesn't mean you ignore challenges. It means you stop letting define you. You shift from focusing on what's missing to appreciating and leveraging what you have. When I made this shift, I noticed it in the small things first. Instead of waking up thinking, I didn't sleep enough, I began the day thinking, I'm grateful for the energy I do have. Instead of seeing a crowded market as a reason not to try, I started seeing it as proof there was value in what I wanted to offer. I stopped waiting to have everything before starting. I started with what I had, where I was, and trusted that growth would come with movement. And you know what it did? An abundance mindset makes you bold. It gives you permission to try without guaranteeing success. It opens your eyes to creative solutions instead of fixed problems. And more importantly, it affects how you treat others. You no longer see people as threats. You see them as partners, mentors, and inspiration. You start rooting for others instead of resenting their wins. And that changes your entire emotional environment. It replaces jealousy with joy. It replaces anxiety with assurance. I saw it play out in my professional life too. Instead of obsessing over competition, I started focusing on contribution. I asked myself, how can I help? Instead of what can I get? And the irony is, the more I gave, the more came back to me. Not always from the places I expected, but always in the way I needed. People responded to the energy. They trusted me more. Opportunities started showing up, not because the world suddenly changed, but because Gaivi did. This mindset doesn't mean everything becomes easy, but it makes it possible. Because now I walk into situations believing there's a way forward. I believe my growth isn't limited by my current resources, but expanded by my current mindset. I stopped waiting for permission and started acting from a place of purpose and trust. If you feel stuck, if you're caught in cycles of fear or comparison, I want to challenge you. What if it's not your situation that needs to change? What if it's your eye lens? What if you started seeing abundance instead of lack, gratitude instead of gaps? What would you do differently if you truly believed there was enough? That shift from scarcity to abundance didn't just change my results, it changed my identity. And that's when life started expanding, not because I had more, but because we believed I could create more. There was a point in my life when I constantly felt like I was falling short. No matter how much I achieved, it never felt like enough. I would set goals, chase them hard, and the moment I hit one, I would immediately move the target further away. It was exhausting. I thought I was being ambitious, but in reality, I was being unkind to myself. I had confused progress with perfection, and in that mindset, nothing was ever truly a win. The mindset that changed everything for me was learning to focus on progress, not perfection. Perfection is a trap. It convinces you that unless everything is flawless, it doesn't count. It tells you that you can't start unless you're ready, that you can't speak unless your words are perfect, that you can't show up until everything looks polished. And so, what happens? You don't start. You delay. You doubt yourself. And even when you don't move, you're so focused on what's missing that you overlook how far you've come. I lived like that for years. Every little mistake felt like failure. Every imperfection made me question my worth. But when I started measuring progress instead, I found freedom. Progress means forward motion. It's about growing, learning, evolving, even if it's messy, even if it's slow. And once I embraced that, everything started shifting. I began to see the value in small steps. I celebrated the effort, not just the outcome. I started acknowledging that doing something imperfectly is far better than doing nothing at all. And more importantly, I started feeling proud of myself, not for being flawless, but for being wit and showing up. This mindset affected how I approached everything: my work, my relationships, my health, and even my goals. I no longer waited for the perfect to start something, because that time doesn't exist. I stopped obsessing over whether my work would be judged or criticized and just focused on making it better each time. I treated myself like a project in motion, not a final product. And that one mental shift made me more consistent, more creative, and more confident. One of the most powerful things I learned was that progress builds momentum. When you focus on making small improvements every day, those changes compound. A 1% improvement might feel insignificant in the moment, but done consistently, it becomes life-altering. And what's beautiful about focusing on progress is that you're never really done. Not in a way that's stressful, but in a way that's energizing. Because there's always room to grow, and that growth becomes its own reward. Letting go of perfection also helped me become more compassionate, both with myself and with others. I no longer demanded perfection from the people around me. I started valuing authenticity over appearance. I appreciated vulnerability effort, and honesty far more than I ever had before. And that deepened my relationships in a way I never expected. I learned to forgive myself for my flaws, and that allowed me to extend the same grace to others. Now, whenever I take on something new, whether it's a challenge, a habit, or a goal, I ask myself, am I growing? Am I learning? Am I getting a little better? If the answer is yes, then I'm winning. That's what progress looks like. It's not about never failing. It's about failing forward. It's about trying again. It's about being a little braver, a little wiser, a little stronger every single day. So if you're holding back because you're waiting to be perfect, I want you to know this: perfection isn't the goal. Growth is. Take the step, make the move. Celebrate the imperfect wins. Because progress, not perfection, is what truly changes lives. It's what changed mine, immediately and completely. For a long time, I thought discipline was about restriction. I believed it was something rigid, something that took the fun out of life. I associate it with pressure, with rules, with doing things you don't want to do. So, like many people, I avoided it. I told myself I was being free-spirited, that I was spontaneous, that I thrived on inspiration. But deep down, I felt scattered, inconsistent, and frustrated with my lack of progress. It wasn't until I embraced the mindset that discipline equals freedom that my life began to shift in a real, immediate way. At first, it sounded like a contradiction. How could discipline, routine, structure, commitment ever equal freedom? But when I looked closer, I realized that my lack of discipline was the very thing keeping me stuck. Without it, I was constantly reacting. I was at the mercy of my mood, my distractions, my circumstances. I'd start things and not finish them. I'd set goals and never follow through. And the result? I wasn't free. I was trapped in a cycle of inconsistency and regret. Discipline changed that. It gave me structure, yes, but not to limit me. It gave me structure so I could build something. Like a strong foundation that supports a house, discipline gave me the base to create, to grow, and to move forward with confidence. The more I showed up consistently, the more I started to trust myself. And that trust is where the real freedom began. You see, freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, whenever you want. That kind of freedom is short-term. It feels good in the moment, but it often leads to long-term disappointment. Real freedom, the kind that lasts, comes from knowing you're in control of your actions, your habits, and ultimately your life. It comes from keeping promises to yourself, and that only happens when you practice discipline. When I embraced this mindset, everything started to change. I built a morning routine that anchored me. I created time blocks in my day that allowed me to focus deeply without distraction. I made commitments and actually kept them. Not because it was always easy, but because it aligned with who I wanted to become. And with every small act of discipline, I felt more empowered. One of the biggest shifts was understanding that discipline is an act of self-respect, not self-punishment. When I follow through on what I said I would do, even when it's hard, I reinforce the belief that I can trust myself. That trust builds momentum, and that momentum creates results. Whether it was exercising regularly, building new habits, writing consistently, or improving my mindset, discipline was the doorway to progress. This mindset also taught me that motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. Some days you feel it, most days you don't. But discipline shows up even when motivation doesn't. And that's what separates the dreamers from the doers. The people who succeed aren't always the most talented. They're the most consistent. They do the work even when they don't feel like it, and that consistency compounds. What's beautiful about discipline is that it actually creates more time, more energy, and more clarity. It reduces stress because you're not always scrambling. It increases confidence because you're not guessing. And over time, it allows you to live with intention instead of chaos. That's the freedom I never expected, the ability to live on purpose. So if you've been running from discipline, I want to invite you to look at it differently. See it not as a cage, but as a key that unlocks your potential, sharpens your focus, and gives you access to the life you say you want. Because the truth is, discipline isn't the enemy of freedom, it's the pathway to it. That shift in mindset changed my life immediately. And it can change yours too. There's a moment in life when you realize that everything you've been chasing, success, recognition, validation, feels hollow when it's only about you. I had that moment. I had worked hard, achieved some milestones, hit a few goals, but something was still missing. I couldn't explain it at first. It wasn't burnout, and it wasn't failure. It was a quiet emptiness. That's when I learned the truth that flipped my world upside down. The most fulfilling life isn't built on what you get. It's built on what you give. Serve before you seek. That's the mindset that gave my life depth, direction, and meaning. We're often taught, especially early in life, to go after what we want. Go get the job, go get the house, go get the applause. And while there's nothing wrong with ambition when your life revolves around seeking, seeking validation, money, or even just results. You start to lose touch with the greater purpose behind it all. You start doing things for the reaction instead of the impact. And the result, you may achieve, but you won't feel fulfilled. That was me. I was always seeking the next thing, the next level, the next acknowledgement. But when I started approaching life with the question, how can I serve? Everything changed. I stopped obsessing over how to be impressive and started focusing on how to be useful. Whether it was in conversations, in my work, or even in daily interactions, I asked myself, am I here to take or am I here to contribute? That mindset changed the way I showed up for people. I listened more deeply. I became more present. I offered help without keeping score. I supported others even when there was nothing in it for me. And something beautiful happened. The more I gave, the more connected I felt. To people, to purpose, to life. And ironically, the more I gave, the more opportunities came back to me. Not because I manipulated the system, but because people feel when your intentions are genuine. Serving before seeking doesn't mean you neglect your own dreams. It doesn't mean you say yes to everything or that you become a doormat. It means you lead with value. You give before you ask. You focus on how you can contribute before you consider what's in it for you. That's what builds trust. That's what builds character. That's what builds a life worth living. In business, this mindset gave me an edge. Instead of trying to sell myself, I focused on solving problems. Instead of networking to get something, I built relationships to offer something. And over time, people remembered that. They responded to it because when you serve with no strings attached, you stand out in a world that's constantly trying to take. In my personal life, this shift brought more peace and purpose. It made my relationships deeper and my days more meaningful. I stopped needing people to validate me because I was already living in alignment with something bigger than ego. I was living in contribution, and that felt good in a way that praise never could. When you serve before you seek, you build from a place of abundance. You stop approaching life as if there's not enough. You begin to trust that when you give generously, life finds a way to give back. Maybe not always in the way you expect, but always in the way you need. So if you're feeling disconnected or stuck, ask yourself, am I focused on what I can get or what I can give? That one question has the power to shift your energy, your relationships, your work, and ultimately your life. The mindset of serving first didn't just change what I did, it changed who I became. And from that place, everything got better immediately. There was a time when I waited for the right moment, the perfect plan, the clear path. I told myself I needed more clarity, more resources, more confidence before I could take the next step. But the longer I waited, the more stagnant I became. I was stuck in a loop of overthinking and hesitation. And then one day, it hit Meg, clarity doesn't come before action. It comes because of it. That realization flipped my mindset and changed the trajectory of my life immediately. Most of us believe we need to have everything figured out before we begin. We want the full map before we take the journey. But life doesn't work that way. Clarity is not something you find while sitting still. It's something you uncover as you move. When I finally accepted that, I gave myself permission to start before I felt ready. And ironically, that's when things started to make sense. I began taking small steps, even if they felt uncertain. I stopped asking, what if it goes wrong? And started asking, what can I learn? Every action, no matter how small, revealed new information. Every experience, even the uncomfortable ones, gave me more insight into who I was and what I truly wanted. I learned more by doing in a week than I had by thinking for months. Action created momentum, and momentum created confidence. I used to think confidence came first, that I needed to feel sure of myself before I made a move. But confidence isn't something you find. It's something you earn through repetition, resilience, and courage. Every time I took a step, even when I was uncertain, I proved to myself that I could handle it. That's how clarity showed up, not in a flash of inspiration, but in the slow, steady unfolding of consistent action. This mindset also taught me the value of imperfection. When you act before you feel fully prepared, you will make mistakes. That's okay. Those mistakes are not setbacks, they are signposts. They show you what works, what doesn't, what matters. Instead of fearing failure, I began to embrace it as feedback. I realized that every misstep was simply data, and with enough data, clarity always follows. In my relationships, career, health, and goals, I applied this principle. Instead of waiting for the perfect conditions, I moved forward with what I had. I trusted that clarity would meet me on the path, not at the starting line. And it did, sometimes not immediately, sometimes not in the way I expected, but always at the right time, because I had the courage to begin. The truth is, inaction breeds doubt. The longer you sit in indecision, the heavier the fear becomes. But action, even imperfect action, breeds clarity. It helps you course correct. It gives you direction. It transforms the unknown into the known. And when you realize that, the fear of starting begins to fade. Now, when I feel stuck or uncertain, I don't wait for the perfect answer. I take the next step, no matter how small. I start writing. I make the call. I have the conversation. I try the thing. Because I've learned that clarity is not a lightning bolt from the sky. It's a result of showing up again and again. If you're feeling lost, if you're waiting for certainty, I want to challenge you: stop waiting, start moving. Don't aim for perfection, aim for progress. Let action be your teacher. Let movement be your guide. Because the path to clarity is not paved with overthinking, it's revealed through motion. That shift in mindset didn't just help me find direction. It gave me the power to create it. And once I started, I never looked back.